Hi, this is Barbara Sanders, and this is my YouTube channel, Sacred Metamorphoses. You can subscribe for free below, so please do if you'd like. And I'm beginning a series called Sacred Activism for a little while. And I'm happy to announce and to bring Tracy Roberts here, who excuse me, I'm getting comfortable here, who can tell you more about himself, and I'm going to introduce him in a minute. I think, Tracy, we may be sort of kindred souls, and I don't know you very well. I know you mostly through your wife, Leanne Roberts, whom I love, and we've got to talk because I started looking up. Okay, so I'm going to just say a few of these things that is true about Tracy, or you can correct me. Here's my kindred souls thing. We both grew up in Mississippi.
Yep.
We both got masters in social work, which I didn't know you had, from
Yep.
University of Tennessee.
Yep.
We both worked at Oasis Center at some point in the past, and it's a youth serving, family serving agency in Nashville. You can say more about that if you'd like. We also both worked at Centerstone, which was Dee Dee Wallace when I worked there in the alcohol and drug program. That's where I started my career. Oh my God. I'm like,
That's where I ended my career.
ended that career. Yeah, I went into psychiatric hospitals after that, so that was really a mistake. Anyway, um, and nonviolent communication. So it looks like you were on the board of that in Nashville,
Yep.
and I studied some with James Lawson, and just
Oh wow.
my heart, my heart. Um, let's see. So I will have Tracy introduce himself in a minute, but I'd like to begin this sacred activism piece with a meditation prayer, which is something by Richard Rudd, who is the Gene Keys author and the Gene Keys set of programs author and teacher, healer, writer. You can look him up at Gene, Gene Keys, KES.com. And I just love this Holy Incantation of Solace. It's a Holy Incantation of Solace. May love throw, may love flow through our souls where we are together as one. May light flower in our heart, lending us the grace to transform all fear. May warmth radiate in our belly, bringing prosperity to all. May purity shimmer in our bones, filling us with the light of the stars. May kindness resound in our voice, softening the way that lies ahead. May clarity shine through our mind as we lie in the arms of the infinite. May solace abound in our life, touching all who we meet. And may silence abound in the world, bringing all beings into perfect union. So again, that's the Gene Keys. And with that, um, I'm going to ask Tracy to say some things about himself and his career and his interests, and to talk about sacred activism if he wants to. And I'll chime in if that's okay. I'll interrupt you at times. Sorry, I do that. And I'll try to listen really well. Tracy Roberts, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Barbara. Tracy Roberts, I am a social worker who facilitates peacemaking circles. And my wife and partner, Leanne, and I started the Circle Center here in Nashville in 2008. And if you go into business with your spouse, it can only go two ways. So I'm knocking on wood at 9:15 on a Wednesday. We're still going strong. It'll be 17 years, September 1st.
And thank you. Let me also just say the date of today is the 16th of April, 2025. I forgot that. And I agree with you about it could go two ways. Congratulations.
Thank you. I have a sacred relationship with the number four. So 416 is doubly good. So thank you for reminding me of the date. I may have missed it with all the turmoil
Oh,
going on right now. So I got my master's degree in social work at the University of Tennessee in 2001. I claimed no orange in my wardrobe. They were the ones with the paperwork I needed. Um, and I was a therapist. I was a therapist for about 7 years in a couple of different capacities: drug and alcohol, adolescent therapist. I was also a clinical case manager, and I did that for about, like I said, 7 years. And I don't know if you've ever seen a burnout social worker. I was working as the clinical case manager. Oasis Center used to have a transitional living home for 17 to 21-year-olds experiencing homelessness. And I was done with social work. And this was in 2006. I was going to go work for UPS.
Oh my goodness.
The guy across the street works for UPS. He's like, yeah, come load the docks during the holidays, show up on time. I wanted to drive the cool truck, wear the cool outfit. People are happy to see me coming. Um, I wouldn't get called at 2 in the morning to come up to residential. So an opportunity came to go to a peacemaking circle training in Chelsea, Massachusetts. It's an organization called ROCA. They're very much like Oasis Center, Youth Center, work with 14 to 23-year-olds. And I didn't want to go. And Leanne, in her infinite wisdom, said, if you don't want to go this bad, you might need to go.
Oh.
And I was like, well, I don't know what new age wisdom this is.
Smart woman.
So I went, and super skeptical. I walk in, there's 35 people around a centerpiece. They're blessing an eagle feather, they're burning sage. The executive director, Molly Baldwin, was facilitating. This is a 4-day training. And I thought, these people are lost their minds. What I did know about ROCA is they were facilitating peacemaking circles like this in juvenile court, victim offender programs, Department of Children's Services and foster care reunification, and Suffolk County school system. So they were facilitating in these big bureaucratic, stale spaces. So that opened my mind. And after about 2 hours, I didn't know anybody in that space except the shelter director who went with me from Oasis Center. After 2 hours, I felt my feet firmly planted in a river that I did not know existed. And I thought to myself, if I'm going to stay in this work, social work, of working with human beings, this is what I'm going to do.
Wow.
And
Well,
I
that
had to,
just chills and energy flowing just through me like a new age person. Just like, that's a stunning story. Thank you.
and I say that tongue in cheek because I used to be that person to mock uh, kind of the unmeasurable, as I like to say. And I know Rachel Redmond likes to talk about the things that can affect us on a soul level we can't put on a chart. So I used to be that person, and so I'm kind of making fun of myself when I say that. But I had a big plan. I'm going to get my licensure and be a therapist, and my side job would be circle facilitation. So I worked at Centerstone at Room at the Inn. They had a therapist there. I was the first person to sit in that chair who worked with the homeless men in recovery. They had a residential program. This is in 2007, 2008. And I came to the conclusion, a couple things happened in synchronicity. I don't like working with suicidal and homicidal people, which is important to know if you're working with suicidal and homicidal people. And then an opportunity came to facilitate peacemaking circles through the Healing Trust. This was when Kathy Self was the CEO at the Healing Trust. The Healing Trust is a foundation in Middle Tennessee, and they they fund positions for about 50 or 60 nonprofits all through Middle Tennessee.
Mhm.
So those two things happened. I can't do this, and there's an opportunity to do this. And that's pretty much how the Circle Center started in 2008. Again, back to the four. I was with a therapist at the time, and I was 44 in 2008. And he said some cultures believe 44 is a portal. So I believe I stepped into that portal.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that.
So that's how we got started. Um, and I can talk more about what we currently do, how we got to do what we do, why I believe facilitating peacemaking circles is sacred activism. I do want to say we did not invent Circle. Circle has been on the planet, on every continent since the dawn of time, and cultural appropriation is real. And so we do have an indigenous woman to this continent who's been working with us for the past 9 years. And there's this Western thing because I asked her about 4 years ago, hey, can I put you on our website? Thinking, well, of course, she wants to be known. And she asked me not to. And she asked me not to speak about her in any kind of electronic fashion because she says people start to call her and she's too busy. She doesn't do trainings. She does mentoring and she has a specific day job. So
Wow.
she has really challenged us to lean into circle process, not as something that we do 2, 3 hours a day, but a way of being.
Thank you. And I appreciate your transition because I think we need to talk about sacred activism since this is my first in the series. And I'm not sure how to define it, but I liked how you brought her in because we are Western. We grew up here in the deep South, United States of America, and I will only say this once or twice. We live in the most confusing, chaotic time I've ever lived in, probably in my lifetime, and many people. I don't want to talk about politics here or our leadership or get anyone into any trouble, including ourselves. But I do believe that any of us these days, and I'm not quite paranoid, but any of us these days could be taken off the street and taken to Guantanamo or El Salvador and put in a prison without due process. And the United States may say, it's not our job to bring him back. So I want to be respectful and cautious, but also I am fighting mad, fighting full of rage, um, with nonviolent communication and working with James Lawson in nonviolence. And that was back in 2010 through 12 when he still lived in Nashville. Um, what I loved about it, it was not denying our human feelings. We all have human feelings and we react to these outside circumstances all the time, viscerally, experientially in our bodies, not just mentally and emotionally. And that what I think of as sacred activism is, I think for some people, a little simplistic, but I've never said it out loud. I think sacred activism is about us healing ourselves, helping to heal ourselves, and then being able to share with other people more effectively, more wholly, um, WHOLLY, but I think there's some of the HOLY in there. And that only, and I'm not sure this is true, but only by helping us heal ourselves can we be better human beings, or what they call now the new human is coming, the world is changing, the great turning is happening. I listen to all these mystics and people who talk about the excitement and hope about all this change. And I do believe that perhaps with like Dante's Inferno, we're still going into the Inferno, and we aren't coming up yet. And we may have to go further down still, but we are blooming, we are blossoming, we are growing, and that we can learn everything we want to learn in our minds and with our egos, but it's not about that. It really is about what I think y'all do in peacemaking circles and in your life. See, that's the other part of what I identify with you with. I was a therapist for over 30 years. I worked in juvenile court, public defender's office, psychiatric hospitals, Oasis family service agencies. Anyway, I grew up with an Episcopalian priest as my dad, but in Mississippi, very liberal, progressive people in the Delta in Mississippi. And what I learned through watching him or being around him is that my career has always been my lifestyle. It is a
Mhm.
lifestyle that we live in, and we hopefully learn to take care of ourselves and realize when we don't align with something, and then get into more alignment. And you mentioned social work burnout. I remember hearing people when I was in my private practice for 30 years, in mid-career, I'd hear about people burning out. And I'd be like, oh, that's not me. I'm excited. I'm enthusiastic about my work. I loved my work. And only when life got really, really hard, and that's with a mother who was dying nearby, and being with her through her last year of life, and still working. And I'm sure I burned out toward the end of that. And that was about 2 years ago when I decided to retire or semi-retire from my practice, because I couldn't focus on the outside anymore. So I guess you could call that burnout. I think also, though, it led me into this wonderful space in the past 2 years of quiet and silence. I moved down to Florida for parts of the year so that I could be quiet and not have all the stimulation of Nashville that I've talked about a whole lot. But I've lived in Nashville 50 years and have loved Nashville living there. And at some point, I needed to be away, and I'm still away. I'm coming back in early May. So we'll see how I handle that. But I'm saying all that not to go into my autobiography and really want to hear from you, but it really is about life and our own ways of being, our personalities, our chemistry, our electricity, all the energy that flows around us and through us. And that's what I think we can get better at, being activists. Unlike my early years, I was protesting the Vietnam War in Atlanta, and I was protesting in Nashville against rape, and all those other kinds of protests and marches, and I did all that. But this is a different quality at an older age. Okay, I'll stop now. Sorry. Thank you for listening. But talk to me about your ideas of sacred activism and how you design, implement, and live that way, if you don't mind.
I do have to share. I've had a first thought because you gave a tell that you're from Mississippi because you talked about liberal progressives in Mississippi without missing a beat. Because when people think about Mississippi, but if you live there, I mean, some of my favorite eccentric liberal progressive people are Mississippians because I think it's doubly hard to do it there, and you
Perhaps.
can't kind of halfway do it. Um, so I appreciate you saying that. I've never put it in that context because I know so many liberal progressive people in Mississippi.
Me too. We had the opposite also, but we do everywhere in the South I've ever lived anyway. Yeah.
So when you sent me the email, I never. So we work with Kay Pranis. So Kay Pranis has been doing restorative justice work for 30 years. She lives in Minneapolis. A lot of the books on restorative justice and restorative processes, she'll either co-author or do the forward. And so we do a national and sometimes global Circle Keeper gathering each year, and Kay comes and co-facilitates. And it's people who facilitate Circle. They come from everywhere. Um, we had an interesting discussion once. We had some social work professors. There's a guy at UNC Greensboro who teaches social work in Circle, and this idea of what an activist is. And he's Buddhist and very reclusive, and he's not going to be on a street corner with a sign. His activism looks differently. And I'm not the person either I've been to a couple of marches, but it's not my soul calling. So I never considered really the activism part of what I do, circle process, until I got your email last week. And
Wow.
just, well, wait a minute. I am an activist
Yes, you are.
because the mental model doesn't line up. And the story I want to share briefly. So we go into organizations. We work in a lot of nonprofits. We also do healthcare, sometimes for profit, um, IT, just everything you can think of. And normally we go in for community building, getting to know your coworker. And then if they want to work on communication, if they want to work on shared values, this particular pattern of circles that we facilitate is really grounded in values, which is us at our best selves and what they mean to everybody in the space. Um, and so that's what we normally do. And in 2016, after Trump was elected, I had a woman call me and said, I have a client base that are conservative and liberal, and they're just chewing up my ears on the clock. And it's kind of contaminating my studio here. Long story short, we created a civil discourse circle. Uh, and for me, this is part of the sacred part because when I think about activism, again, mental model, social media, news, pick a side, dig in, be an activist. And so this idea of getting Trump supporters and Clinton supporters, there were a couple of independents, Johnson supporters, in a space and talk about civil discourse. I was like, let's do that. And so we started to gather people, and there's a liberal progressive woman who said, I'm going to invite my brother. He's really a jerk. He's a conservative and he loves pissing off snowflakes. And I said, time out. Your brother has got a wide swath of places to piss off snowflakes. This isn't what we're doing here. So we had 4 or 5 Trump supporters, 5 or 6 Clinton and independents meeting to really talk about civil discourse. So that's the topic. How can we talk about our differences without hating and fighting and this other? And it's not a presentation. I'm not here to do a PowerPoint and tell y'all what you need to do. So I really went in with a clean, just the clean slate. We did an opening check-in. Who are you? Why are you here? And as the talking piece, because we use a talking piece in Circle, as the talking piece was coming to me, I didn't have my second question. Talk about trust the process. I used to say trust the process because it sounded cool. But since I've been facilitating Circle for 18 years, I really am trusting the process. So here comes the talking piece back to me, and everybody's looking at me. What's next? And I have a firm belief for me that the muse shows up in this space for me. And I've kind of done a weird dance with I am most focused, relaxed, and at peace when I'm at work. And when I'm off, not at work, that's when the stress and anxiety and the catastrophizing comes in.
Isn't that lovely, though, that you're able to have a career and work that feeds your soul, that you can drop into that sacred space and be with people and listen and sort of
Yeah.
tune without having to be just the human body that has all its problems and stresses and anxieties. Anyway, I know you're human too, but that's part of my mission these days is how we bring the divine in while we're still human, how we connect with the divine and connect with human beings too. Because I could go out there and do the opposite. I could go to the divine,
Hmm.
though throughout my adult years, I never used the word God or Jesus Christ or anything like that growing up in Mississippi. And even in an Episcopal church, low church, meaning not pious.
Hmm.
Anyway, so I've in the past few years and several years been doing this sort of spiritual practice, as you, I'm sure we've been in a community in Nashville where there are lots of alternative practices, and everybody's done yoga, everybody's done meditation, and all sorts of healing types of things. And it's still, for me, is the human dilemma is how to either know or experience yourself being partly divine, or the divine is inside us, or something, in a way that we can treat ourselves, not just others, but ourselves with grace and gentleness and softness instead of, yeah, going to work and feeling that way and then coming home and sort of beating ourselves up and listening to all the new, and anyway, thank you for saying that.
Yeah, I appreciate a little bit of a sidebar because I'm connecting with what you're saying. A lot of times in Circle, we'll meet once a month and we're trying to bridge those meetings in organizations. So we'll, choose a value you want to keep in the forefront of your brain. Like I had "be kind" on the dashboard of my car for 4 years
Mhm,
for a reason,
mhm,
because
mhm.
I forget.
Driving.
But the whole thing about grace, I choose grace a lot, and it is for me. Be graceful with myself.
Mhm,
Appreciate you saying that. And back to the civil discourse circle, the muse gifted me the next question, which was the next prompt. And I've learned in circle through the years, don't ask a question or a prompt that you know the answer to. Like approaching it all with curiosity,
yes.
even if you think you know, even if I've spotted that person and I was like, I know who that person is, and they're going to say this,
Mhm.
I am gleefully wrong just every time. Um, so the prompt was talk about a value you have in yourself that your candidate represented. And we passed the talking piece. And the most conservative dude in there, and I don't want to give away any kind of hints of who was in that space because of confidentiality, but he worked with a very oppressed population through a ministry, and he went on this. He had almost I want to say a soliloquy. I don't know if that's the right term, about when we see somebody and we hear about their story, we think we know everything about that person. He started to get teary eyed, and he was just, it's, if you walked in and heard it, it would sound like he was preaching, but he was not at the pulpit and this, that, or the other. And he was speaking from his heart. He was speaking from that sacred space with some people who didn't vote like him. Sitting next to him was a progressive liberal young man. I mean, you look, these two people couldn't be any more different.
Mhm,
Got the talking piece. And through that exercise, we created values for that space.
mhm.
This is how we want to show up and practice. And we did a couple of other prompts. And by the end of the circle, before we even ended, those two men hugged each other and unprompted and unscripted hugged each other in circle and both teary eyed. And one of the things we realized with, you know, minds weren't changed. Like nobody left that circle thinking different about policy, but hearts were changed.
Yes.
And so we continued to meet for, I think, 16 months, once a month. Um, and I lost, and this is up for, we talk about this. I do circle trainings twice a year. And we talk about this at circle training. I lost my empathy for Trump, and I felt like I couldn't be neutral and facilitate that peacemaking circle anymore. And I'm coming to an understanding that neutrality is kind of a sign of white supremacy. So I'm
Well,
really, but at that time, 9 years ago, I think it's when he dropped an F bomb at the Boy Scout meeting. I'm like, I'm out of here. I'm really having a hard time digging into how we can support the president of the United States cussing on stage in front of teenagers. It just did not compute. Um, so I lost my empathy and just had to step back from that facilitation.
well, and it sounds like, is this true that maybe you also judged yourself harshly for losing your empathy, whereas that is a natural, normal process too, right? And we have to acknowledge that too. I have trouble with people who have the most loving kindness presentation, and then if you really get to know them, there's a backstab that goes along with that loving kindness presentation. And yeah, so and you sound like you've learned since then, as I've learned too, that activism is not neutrality. It is not just taking a side, but it is trying to be open to other people and other systems and other races and other spiritualities and all that other stuff, uh, with some degree of respect and empathy so that we can hear more clearly other people's experience. And I will just say that my experience is that a lot of those people who drive me crazy or I'm angry at or all sorts of feelings about are their lives are based in trauma. And when we know about trauma as you do, it's really it's like I want to talk to the American public. Look, don't vote for these people who are based in such complex trauma that it gets acted out every day in this administration. And but some of those people look good. Again, they look good, they sound good at first, and everyone's disappointed in parts of our lifestyle and economy and all
Um,
sorts of things. So I understand also why some people would vote for that kind of change. Anyway, I'll stop there.
Yeah, I definitely see both sides.
Yeah.
And I appreciate what you said about trauma. And it's interesting. We work with lots of organizations that are trauma informed care. What we've been stepping into for the past 5 or 6 years is a lot of them are trauma informed with their clients and not trauma informed with each other. So
Yes.
they kind of take this executive white patriarchal stance in running the organization and more of a matriarchal acceptance with the clients. And we're like, well, what if we tried more of the matriarchal piece with each other, and what would that look like? The term that's been coming up in an organization I've been working with recently is collective care.
I like that collective care. Mhm.
So how do we care for each other? Um,
And for ourselves. And by the way, I have been a feminist since the 1970s and women's lib and all that other stuff. And then got into the spiritual community that I was impressed with priestess paths and, all sorts of astrology and galactic stuff. And I'm really still into that stuff. But it's like no longer is it just the divine mystery and the great divine feminine. It is about the divine masculine too.
mhm.
However, we've been raised in this patriarchy of white supremacy and many of our institutions, most of our institutions in our lives. And so we are trying to, piece together and explore ourselves to figure out what parts are ours, what parts are not ours, what parts we can let go of that we've been living all our lives with this worry or stress or anxiety that I'm going to make a mistake when I'm talking to a person of another color, all sorts of things, and really become clear about who we are, having been conditioned in this patriarchy and where we can go now. We don't have to worry about what to call it, I don't think, but it really does include all living beings. I wouldn't say just human beings, all living beings, and maybe spirit beings too. I'm doing the preaching now. I'm sorry, but I
No,
feel like a preacher these days.
it's super helpful because, like I said, I didn't, it kind of went against my academic mind to not prepare. It's like almost being irresponsible. Like, how could you not prepare for talking today? But what you're talking about, I didn't. I did take a couple of notes previous, but what I didn't take was really leaning into it'll be my life goal to have more of our conservative brothers and sisters in spaces like this. Because a lot of times when I have been in circle spaces, everybody kind of looks the same and talks the same and all that. And that's not what I'm so interested in. I heard a fantastic testimony. A woman hired us about 5 or 6 years ago, uber conservative, and through the circle process in a previous entity that we facilitated with her, she got this soul download of like, aha. And so the way she marketed it to her team, and it was a pretty big team, was if I can get this process, anybody can get this process.
And that's what you said of yourself going into the peacemaking circle training as a skeptic and cynic almost, and then
Yeah.
just all of a sudden feeling that water.
Because I really think the healing is going to happen collectively. Um, and the people who came to the civil discourse circle, they wanted to be there. They wanted to have civil discourse. Nobody was kind of forced to be there, and nobody's agenda was it. They, I just think there are so many people who want to be in that kind of space. I blame social media and politics of just dig in, choose your side. You have to. You don't. You may not even understand your stance. You just have to defend it.
Right.
And I've heard so many people have these understandings in circle because with the talking piece, you were invited to listen. And with a bigger group, it's hard to listen. But again, it's for understanding. And then let's get to the hard things. But first, let's find out. And Molly Baldwin, who the executive director at Roca, she talked about, we're more alike than we are different.
Absolutely.
And the powers that be, I used to say, so I grew up playing sports. And I used to use sports as one of those politics and media. But when I thought about sports, most of my time playing sports was practice and being vulnerable with your teammates. Like
Mhm.
everybody knew their weakness. Everybody knew, the goal was to win, but there is a vulnerability piece that's a major component of that I had lost sight of because of this goal of, win, conquer, power over, and the restorative is power with.
Right.
And that's what I love about circle, and I get goosebumps. I'm a bit of a circle nerd, is when the most oppressed people in our society speak and everyone's listening to them, or when the more conservative people can talk about their faith and beliefs in a way that is their truth and it's not condemning or pigeonholing. I had a person in a circle once said, "This is the first time I've ever talked about I teach Sunday school, and I've never felt comfortable to say that, but that's my faith." And he wasn't preaching in the parking lot or anything. He just wanted, that's an important part of himself. And to have that honored in that space, that's why one of the reasons, 100 reasons I do the work, just so people can step into their truth in a good way that doesn't cause harm.
Yes. And for that person, for instance, why would it be a vulnerability or shameful in some way saying I teach Sunday school? And my guess is that person was out in the world, in the marketplace, where you don't talk about that stuff, or you didn't used to talk about it. And now we
Yeah.
have people talking about that stuff who are hypocrites too. And I did grow up with that, seeing the people come to church on Sundays and then go out and treat other people horribly in Mississippi in the civil rights movement. um, I love what you're saying, Tracy. I love what you're saying, what you've been doing, what Leanne's been doing all these years. And I've never attended a circle training, though I know y'all have them. I've every now and then heard about them. That's interesting. I would fit right in there. I grew up in high school, going to a family laboratory, they called it, in the human development move, not human development, human something movement in the Episcopal Church at Canoga, North Carolina. And we were doing kid groups and family groups and doing a group process when I was 16 years old. Of course, at 16, I fell in love with someone there. So of course I didn't really get it all, but kept doing that kind of work. My dad did that kind of work, and it was not something back then that I even knew how to talk about. I didn't even know, people were doing, they called them tea groups at one point too. And then encounter groups got going, and
Mhm.
then people, there were no boundaries, and people got all messed up with all that. But peacemaking circles is what I've really lived through in my early years and still believe in my heart. So I'll have to come to a circle training sometime. Be sure to put me on your email list.
Yep.
Yeah,
Well, we have one August 15th and 17th. It's on the website. I'll send you the info. Um,
could do that.
and I
Yeah,
just, if I could, so what I'm seeing happening now, and I'm mindful of time.
I just was looking too. Okay.
We are working with a state organization with, so there's a woman, Adriana Carter, I co-facilitate with a younger Black woman.
Mhm.
And I say younger,
Ah,
she's older to some people, but younger to me. So we're working with the statewide organization, 27 people in a space for 3 hours. And it's basically community building. And this is where we are today. I think there's such a need for this. Um, and I haven't found the right term because and you understand this. Circle is a very simple process that's very hard to facilitate. So, as a professional, and I have a master's degree and I know stuff, don't make me pull out my degree and tell you I know stuff. We asked 3 questions with 27 people. We did I did improv for a minute. And so we do improv group, improv games. We ask people to bring an object of significance from their workspace and talk about it. And then we ask, what do you need to practice as a human being in this space, and what do you need from your teammates? And we made a list.
mhm.
And the executive director had so many people tell her that was the best professional development we've ever had here. So
Right.
either A, they've been having really lousy professional development, or B, that's what they needed. And we keep meeting these groups of people where we are in 2025 in April. They they want to be in a space and share with other people.
Right.
They don't want to do it all day. We just carved out 3 hours, but it was so meaningful for them to hear from their coworkers. How are you?
Yes.
What do you need? There's this something we learned about during COVID is the flock response, because it's usually fight, flight, or freeze. But the flock response, we saw this a lot in COVID, and the way Leanne says it, it's like, you just need to count your chickens' heads to make sure we're all here.
Hmm.
And from what I understand, that when they studied the stress response, it was a lot of white men in executive business positions. So it's fight, flight, or freeze. The flock is more of a feminist perspective, and maybe even people of color and people who've been oppressed. That's their reaction to stress. Are we all here? Are we all okay? What do we need? So
Yes.
we're seeing so much more of that.
Yes, and I will say that I've heard fight, flight, freeze, and the feminine way, which is to get into relationship. And I think that's what you're saying. Flock is connecting, is another way to deal with that kind of stress. And I keep wanting to bring up the one time I saw you facilitate or participated in your facilitation. And I'm trying to do this. I will do this without breaking any confidentiality whatsoever. but I was in this maybe 20, 25 member group circle that Tracy came in to facilitate. And I'd heard good things about him. I didn't know him. This was years ago. And I joke with him when I see him now because it's like I ended up, when it was my turn to talk or whatever, I was crying. I was just crying. And what, and I'm telling you this, Tracy, because what that helped me realize being in that group process about values, connecting dynamics, all of that, was that I was not well aligned with that group of people or some of the group of people who are sort of in charge. And that helped me. I didn't know this at the time, but later it helped me move away from that circle. But you did a great job. And it was like, this is my kind of guy, this is my kind of guy. We're social workers here. I think there were maybe one or two other social workers, but thank you for that because that was inspiring, stunning, and I think alignment is so important. And once we're in alignment, we just feel so much better and we can give and be good and kind to other people when we're in that alignment. And unfortunately, a lot of us can't always work in places
Yeah.
that we're aligned. And there are so many people being oppressed, as you know, and I feel very privileged and blessed to be where I am these days, and actually to be female, because I know white males have gotten a really bad rap, but there are some good ones.
Hmm.
My friend Leanne married one, and I've got one too. And I wish we could clone y'all and put you all around the world. But um, thank you for this. Tell me some last thoughts that you would like to share. Anything.
Um, there's an interesting juxtaposition with facilitating peacemaking circles in a business and then facilitating in a community. We've got a friend named Jabali in Seattle, and he says, once you add currency, the process tends to get contaminated.
Thank
Uh,
you.
and so it's really hard to find that balance. The indigenous woman who trains us, we did a training with her on Zoom, and I held up my agenda, and she kind of squinted and she said, "What is that?" And she just said, "Let spirit guide us." And that's true. Um, that doesn't look good on a grant. We're going to let spirit guide us. So when we do write grants and we do talk about goals and outcomes, they are 100% spirit guided. And we just want to get in the door and use language that might help us get in the door. And once we pass that talking piece, people tend to get it and understand it. Not everybody does.
Right. But I will say I can just imagine y'all working with boards that go on retreat together. And I still have some clients who talk about having to go to the board retreat. And it's like the last thing I want to do is go to some touchy-feely group where everybody's talking, and then if you can get them in the door, it can happen. And some people will come out of it, as you say, and say, what good did this do? We didn't do strategic planning. Well, no, but you did some.
All right.
Yeah, and it takes over time, that kind of process too, not just a one shot deal. I know
Yeah.
for lots of groups and people, including myself. So, thank you so much for being here. I do want to suggest that our next this is funny. We have a few more people coming after you. One is David McMillan, who is a
Oh, yeah.
psychologist, writer, so many other things in Nashville. And then Toby Fishel, who used to be in Nashville, who's now in California, writer, teacher, artist, healer, amazing woman. And so I'm really excited that you and I started this off today and that we will see how it grows and develops. And thank you for helping me create it. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Okay, well, I'm going to say goodbye and you can, I will put the link to the Circle Center on my description in this YouTube channel. Y'all can subscribe. Y'all can go to Tracy's website and Leanne's website and find out more about them. They also have a YouTube channel that I will get information about.
Right on.
Thank
All
you. Have a great day.
right.
All right, bye-bye.